"Keep that baby, and you are no daughter of mine," my dad roared, his heavy finger pointing toward the front door. I left that night at 24 years old, packing a single duffel bag, while my family stood in the hallway and watched me walk out into the freezing wind. 6 years later, those exact same people stood on my front porch, looking at me with desperate, hungry eyes. They had not come to apologize. They had come to harvest the DNA of the very child they once called a disgusting sin, all to cure my older sister. "She owes us," my sister would later smirk, sitting on my couch like a queen demanding tribute from a peasant. The sheer entitlement made my blood run ice cold. They thought I was still that terrified, homeless 24-year-old girl they could easily break. They were very wrong. I am an intensive care unit charge nurse now, and I know how to handle toxic waste. Let me tell you exactly how this nightmare escalated, how they tried to rip my beautiful life apart, and how I systematically destroyed theirs. You really need to understand the kind of people I am dealing with here. If you want to know why I did not scream, why I did not immediately slam the heavy wooden door right in their faces, you have to go back to that November night 6 years ago. We lived in a huge, pristine house in a wealthy suburb of Ohio. My dad, Alden, was an elder at our massive local church, a man who believed God spoke directly into his ear and agreed with every single prejudice he held. My mother, Blythe, was his perfect echo. She was a woman who cared vastly more about what the neighbors thought of her manicured front lawn than what happened to her children's souls. And then there was Corinne, my older sister, the golden child, the miracle daughter. She never stepped out of line, never brought shame to the family name, and always made sure to remind me in small, cruel ways of how deeply flawed I was compared to her. When I sat at the expansive mahogany kitchen table and told them I was 3 months pregnant and the father was entirely out of the picture, the silence in that room was suffocating. It was the kind of silence that rings in your ears. Dad set down his expensive silver fork. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, looked at me like I was a cockroach that had just crawled out of his kitchen drain, and delivered his verdict. "No child of sin sleeps under my roof." My mother did not argue. She did not cry. She just carefully folded her cloth napkin and stared at the granite countertop. Corinne leaned against the grand wooden staircase, arms crossed, wearing this tiny, self-satisfied smirk that I will never forget as long as I live. I asked my mother for my heavy winter coat because it was snowing outside. Thick, blinding Ohio snow. She looked at the coat hanging on the rack, looked at my father, and then handed me nothing. I walked out into the blizzard in a thin gray sweater. I drove my beat-up sedan until the gas light turned on somewhere past the state line, and I slept in a desolate grocery store parking lot with my bare hands wrapped around my stomach, trying desperately to keep my unborn baby warm. That was the exact night I learned that the people who were supposed to love me considered me entirely disposable. I built my current life from the dirt up. I did not have a safety net. I did not have a trust fund. For the first 2 years, I cleaned corporate office buildings in the dead of night while my daughter, Veda, slept in a cheap cloth carrier strapped tightly to my chest. My back ached, my hands cracked from the harsh industrial chemicals, but I kept going. Then I clawed my way into a demanding nursing program. I studied anatomy while feeding my baby. I took exams on zero sleep. And during that grueling process, I met Hollis. Hollis is a third-grade teacher with the kindest brown eyes and the strongest spine of anyone I have ever known. We got married in a tiny, quiet courthouse in North Carolina. We bought a modest little house with a front porch and a patch of green grass. Veda is 5 years old now. She loves dinosaurs. She has a tiny gap between her front teeth, and she calls me Mama and calls Hollis Mom. We are a family. Small, fiercely protective, and profoundly happy. I blocked my parents' phone numbers 6 years ago. I never sent them a single picture. I never told them what state I moved to. I erased them from my universe. So you can imagine the sheer, visceral shock that hit my nervous system at 8 in the morning on a gray Tuesday. I had just come off a brutal 12-hour night shift at the hospital. I was still wearing my faded blue scrubs, smelling faintly like medical-grade bleach, stale coffee, and deep exhaustion. My feet throbbed. I was looking forward to a hot shower and my bed. The doorbell rang. I opened the door, expecting the mail carrier or a delivery driver. Instead, my buried past was standing on my welcome mat. My mother, Blythe, stood in the front. She was clutching a bright pink paper gift bag to her chest like a protective shield. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless, as if she were heading to a Sunday service. Behind her was my dad, wearing his tailored dark suit, his face set in that familiar, judgmental grimace I had spent years trying to forget. And leaning against my porch railing, looking bored and irritated, was Corinne. She looked thinner than I remembered, her skin slightly gray and washed out, but her posture was exactly the same. Arrogant. Impatient. Looking at my house like it was a garbage dump she was being forced to visit for a charity project. They found me. 400 miles away from Ohio, through whatever twisted means they employed, they had tracked me down. Marin, my mother said. Her voice dripped with a sickly sweet syrup that she never, ever used on me when I was a kid. Sweetheart. We came to meet our grandbaby. Every survival instinct in my exhausted body screamed at me to slam the heavy wooden door. But I work in the ICU. When heart monitors start screaming and a patient is actively crashing, you do not panic. You do not flinch. You get quiet. You get precise. I stood firmly in the doorway, blocking their view of the inside of my home, and stared at them with dead eyes. You have exactly 10 seconds to tell me how you got this address, I said. My voice was flat and clinical. My dad stepped forward, puffing out his chest, trying to physically intimidate me just like he used to. Is that how you greet your family? We drove all night through the dark to get here, Marin. God tells us to forgive those who trespass against us, and we are here to extend grace to you. Grace, I repeated, tasting the bitter irony of the word. I looked pointedly at the pink bag my mother was guarding so fiercely. What is in the bag, Blythe? She flinched slightly at the use of her first name. A gift. For the baby. She is 5 years old. She is not a baby. Before my mother could invent another lie, I heard the rapid, familiar pitter-patter of little feet on the hardwood floor behind me. Veda came skidding around the corner in her mismatched dinosaur pajamas, her curly hair a wild mess, holding a green plastic T-Rex. She stopped short when she saw the 3 strangers standing on the porch. She looked up at my mother, then at my father, tilting her head in pure confusion. Just then, Hollis walked out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a checkered dish towel. Veda immediately ran to Hollis, wrapped her little arms securely around her legs, and pointed a tiny finger at the open door. Mom, who are those people? Veda asked loudly. The word mom hit my father like a physical blow to the jaw. He stared at Hollis, taking in her short hair, her comfortable sweatpants, and the natural, effortless way my daughter clung to her. His jaw went rigid. The veins in his thick neck bulged. He had spent the entire 400-mile drive rehearsing this moment in his head. He fully expected to find a miserable, struggling, broken single mother desperate for his financial help and religious forgiveness. Instead, he found a confident nurse, a happy child, and a wife. My mother recovered much faster. She forced a bright, terrifying smile that did not reach her cold eyes and crouched down slightly. Hello, Veda. I am your grandma. Aren't you just a beautiful little treasure? She reached into the pink gift bag. My chest tightened, a warning bell ringing in my head. Why would they come now? Nobody chases a child they threw away into the snow unless that child possesses something they desperately need. What were they really hiding in that bag? I did not invite them in. I stood my ground, but my dad pushed past my shoulder anyway, walking into my living room as if his name was printed on the deed to the property. My mother followed quickly, still clutching that pink bag, and Corinne trailed behind them, rolling her eyes at the framed photos of our family vacation on the wall. I exchanged a sharp, knowing look with Hollis. She did not need me to utter a single word. She scooped Veda up seamlessly and quietly carried her upstairs, out of sight, out of reach of these intruders. Nice place, Corinne said, running a manicured finger along the edge of my wooden bookshelf and visibly checking it for dust. Small, but I guess it works for your lifestyle. I crossed my arms tightly over my chest and leaned against the front door, leaving it wide open to let the cold air in. Say whatever you came all this way to say, and then get out. My dad sat heavily on my sofa, resting his large hands on his knees. He looked around the room, pointedly refusing to make eye contact with me. My mother perched nervously on the edge of the floral armchair. Corinne remained standing near the window, refusing to let her designer clothes touch my furniture. "We are not here to fight, Marin," my mother said softly. Her eyes instantly filled with brimming tears. I have to admit, her ability to summon tears on command is truly a terrifying, Oscar-worthy talent. "We are here because we are in terrible, unbearable pain. Your sister, Corinne, is very sick." I looked at Corinne. Now that the harsh morning sunlight was hitting her face through the window blinds, I could see the physical toll. The dark, sunken circles under her eyes, the brittle, thinning texture of her hair, the slight tremor in her fingers. As a nurse, my brain automatically began logging symptoms. "Acute myeloid leukemia," my mother sobbed, pressing a white tissue to her face. "The doctors say it is aggressive. Extremely aggressive. We have tried everything the hospital offered. The chemotherapy treatments are failing. She needs a bone marrow transplant, Marin. She needs a perfect genetic match to survive." The clinical part of my brain automatically started running the complex medical math. AML. Bone marrow transplant. HLA tissue typing. Siblings are always the first line of testing for a match because they share the same genetic parents. But if they were here, 400 miles away, standing in my living room looking around like they were hunting, no, they were not looking for me. They had driven straight to my house without a single phone call beforehand. They were looking at Veda. "I am sorry to hear you are sick, Corinne," I said, keeping my voice entirely neutral, locking away any trace of empathy. "But what does your diagnosis have to do with me?" My dad cleared his throat, activating his booming, authoritative church voice. "Family helps family. We share blood. The doctors said we need to test extended blood relatives because we are running out of options. We want to test the child. We want to test Veda." There it was. The ugly, naked, horrifying truth sitting right in the middle of my living room. They did not care about me. They did not care about the grandchild they had abandoned and ignored for 5 years. They looked at my beautiful, innocent, happy little girl and saw nothing but a biological medical supply closet. They saw a resource they could exploit to fix their broken golden child. "No," I said. Just one single word. No hesitation. No explanation. My mother gasped as if I had physically slapped her across the cheek. Corinne scoffed loudly, a harsh, grating sound. "What do you mean, no?" Corinne snapped, her arrogant facade cracking to reveal the panic beneath. "I am dying, Marin. You are going to sit there and let your own flesh and blood sister die because you are holding on to a petty grudge from 6 years ago. It is just a simple cheek swab," my mother pleaded, reaching her hand into the pink gift bag again. "It is just a little Q-tip, Marin. It does not hurt her at all. It just tells us if she is a match. That is all we are asking for today. Just let us swab her cheek so we can know." As my mother pulled a small, plastic-wrapped buccal swab kit out of the bag, something else shifted inside it. A folded piece of paper slipped out and landed face up on my coffee table. It was thick, cream-colored official cardstock. The exact kind hospitals use for binding legal documents. My mother frantically reached out to grab it, her eyes wide with sudden panic, but I was faster. I stepped forward and snatched it off the table first. I am a charge nurse. I read dense, complicated medical charts at 3 in the morning while patients are actively crashing and alarms are blaring. I can process written medical information faster than most people can blink. I unfolded the thick paper. It was a standard pediatric bone marrow donation consent form from a major transplant center in Ohio. But it was not blank. Someone had already filled it out. At the top, in my mother's neat, looping cursive handwriting, was the donor's name, Veda. Age 5. Relationship to patient, niece. They had filled out every single line on the legal document. The medical record numbers, the contact information, the procedure codes. The only thing missing was my signature at the very bottom, right next to the line explicitly labeled parent or legal guardian consent. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage washed over me. It started deep in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips, making my hands shake slightly. They had not come here to ask for a favor. They had come here assuming they could bully, guilt, or manipulate me into signing a terrifying medical procedure order for my toddler. "You filled out the surgical consent form before you even knocked on my front door," I said, holding the paper up in the air between us. My voice was dangerously quiet, lower than a whisper. My mother swallowed hard, looking away toward the floor. We just wanted to be prepared. "The doctors said time is running out, Marin. We need to move fast." "She owes us," Corinne suddenly spat out, stepping closer to me, her face contorted in anger. "Mom and Dad gave you everything growing up. Food, shelter, an expensive education, and you threw it all away to act like trash. Now is your chance to actually be useful for once in your miserable life. You owe this family your child's marrow." I looked dead into Corinne's sunken eyes. "I owe you nothing. You stood on the stairs and smiled a wicked little smile while Dad kicked a pregnant girl out into a blinding blizzard. You did not even give me a coat to keep me from freezing to death. And now you want me to hand over my daughter so you can put her under heavy anesthesia, drill into her tiny hip bone, and harvest her marrow for you. It is God's will," my dad shouted, standing up abruptly from the sofa. He pointed a thick finger directly at my face, just like he did 6 years ago. "God gives a family the tools to save its own. To hoard that biological gift away out of pure spite is a deadly sin, Marin. You will burn in hell for this. You will sign that paper, or so help me God." "Or what?" I challenged, stepping right into his personal space. I was not a terrified 24-year-old girl anymore. I did not flinch. "You have zero legal rights in this state or any other. Veda is a minor. She cannot consent. I refuse. And there is not a single ethics board, hospital committee, or judge in the United States that will force a 5-year-old to donate marrow to an estranged aunt when the custodial parents say no. You have nothing. Your paperwork is garbage." My dad's face turned a deep, mottled purple. The veins on his forehead pulsed. He looked at Corinne, then back at me. A very nasty, dark, calculated smile slowly spread across his face, replacing the righteous anger with something much more sinister. "We will see about that," he sneered softly. "It would be a real tragedy if the state of North Carolina found out that a sweet, innocent little girl was living in a highly unstable, unnatural household. 2 women playing pretend. A mother who was thrown out of her home for being a deviant. Child Protective Services takes a very close, very harsh look at unfit environments, Marin. Sometimes, courts decide that vulnerable children are vastly better off with traditional, God-fearing grandparents who can provide a stable moral foundation." The room went completely, terrifyingly silent. The threat hung in the stale air like toxic gas. He was threatening to call CPS. He was explicitly threatening to try and steal my daughter away from me, to drag my family through a brutal legal system if I did not let them cut her open for his favorite child. I felt my hands ball into tight fists. How far were these monsters actually willing to go? I stared directly at my father's smug, punchable face, processing the immense gravity of his threat. He was weaponizing the child welfare system to extort a major medical procedure from a kindergartner. It was a new level of depravity, even for a man who kicked his pregnant daughter into a snowstorm. "Get out," I said. My voice did not shake. It was firm, anchored by years of dealing with aggressive patients and frantic families. "Get out of my house right now, or I am calling the police for criminal trespassing and extortion." "You are making a massive, fatal mistake," Corinne hissed, grabbing her expensive leather purse from the floor. "You are murdering me, Marin. You are a cold-blooded murderer." "I am a nurse," I shot back, not breaking eye contact. "I save human lives every single night of my life. But I will not let you sacrifice my daughter on an operating table to save yours. Get out." I watched them march down my walkway and climb into a large, rented black SUV. I stood rigid in the doorway until their red taillights disappeared around the corner of my quiet suburban street. Then, I closed the heavy wooden door, locked the deadbolt, fastened the security chain, and leaned my forehead against the cool painted wood. My heart was hammering wildly against my ribs, echoing in my ears. Hollis came downstairs softly, holding a sleepy Veda in her arms. She handed Veda to me, and I buried my face in my daughter's messy curls, breathing in the innocent scent of strawberry shampoo and sleep. I held her so tight she squirmed and let out a tiny protest. "Did they leave?" Hollis asked quietly, touching my tense shoulder. I nodded, passing Veda back to her so she could put her down for a cartoon in the playroom. When Hollis came back to the kitchen, I laid the whole terrifying encounter out for her. The AML diagnosis. The pre-filled Ohio surgical consent form hidden in a gift bag. And worst of all, the explicit threat to call CPS and weaponize our same-sex marriage to paint us as unfit parents to a Southern judge. Hollis is a gentle, patient third-grade teacher, but when you threaten the safety of her child, she turns into a 5-star general preparing for total war. She did not cry. She opened her laptop immediately and placed it on the kitchen island. "They want to play dirty? Let's see what kind of dirt they are currently standing on," Hollis said, her fingers flying rapidly across the keyboard. We spent the next 3 excruciating hours turning into amateur digital detectives. If they were brazen enough to drive across multiple state lines with a pre-filled surgical consent form for a child they had never even met, they were definitely hiding something else. People like my parents, people who believe they are morally superior to everyone else, always leave a trail of arrogance behind them. "Marin, come look at this," Hollis called out, her voice tight with disbelief. I walked over and stared at the glowing screen. It was a GoFundMe page. The bold title read, "Miracle for Corinne, help save our golden girl." It was created by my mother, Blythe Oakley, exactly 2 months ago. I read the long, emotional description, and the blood in my veins practically boiled over. The campaign detailed Corinne's tragic leukemia diagnosis in flowery, dramatic language. But in the second paragraph, my mother had written a blatant, disgusting lie. Corinne has a younger sister who could potentially help save her life. Sadly, this sister has turned her back on God and our loving family. She is demanding a massive financial payout before she will even consider allowing her child to be tested for a match. We are raising funds to meet her cruel, selfish financial demands and cover emergency medical transport. They were lying to the world. They had never even spoken to me 2 months ago. They invented a horrific story about me extorting them for money to create a villain, making their sob story vastly more compelling to their church friends and community. And it worked perfectly. The total raised amount sitting at the top of the webpage was $45,000. "They are using you as a scapegoat to commit massive charity fraud," Hollis said, her face pale with disgust. But it got worse. Much worse. As I scrolled down the page, my hand shaking on the mouse, I saw an update my mother posted just a week ago. It included a photograph. It was a picture of me and Veda at a local park in our town, smiling by the swings. My mother had somehow stalked my old, supposedly private social media accounts, stolen a picture of my innocent child, and posted it on a public fundraising site claiming I was holding this baby hostage for cash. The comments below were vile. Dozens of people from my old hometown calling me a monster, a demon, wishing harm upon me. "Take screenshots," I instructed, my voice freezing over. "Take screenshots of every single thing. Every vile comment, every lying update, the total amount raised, the dates." While Hollis meticulously archived the GoFundMe fraud, capturing every pixel of their crime, I logged into our secure financial portal. Something had been bothering me for a long time about my credit history, small weird discrepancies I never had the time or energy to chase down between nursing shifts. My dad is an accountant by trade. He loves hoarding money more than he loves drawing breath. If he was willing to lie for $45,000 on the internet, what else was he doing in the shadows? I pulled my old federal tax transcripts. I cross-referenced them with Veda's files. It took me an hour of exhausting digging through the bureaucratic IRS portal, but I found it staring me right in the face. "Hollis," I said, my voice barely a whisper because I could not believe what I was seeing. "Look at this." For the past 5 entire years, my father had been claiming Veda as a dependent on his federal tax returns. He had somehow kept her social security number from a hospital bill he intercepted years ago, right before I cut all contact. He explicitly told the United States government that Veda lived in his home in Ohio, and he had been pocketing thousands of dollars in tax credits every single year for a child he threw out into the freezing street. We had them. We had solid, federally documented proof of tax fraud and wire fraud. My cell phone buzzed loudly against the granite counter, shattering the silence. I jumped. I picked it up and saw an unknown Ohio number. It was a text message. "Marin, it is Macon. Karen's husband. Do not block me. I am not with them. Do not go back to your house tonight. They are meeting with a lawyer right now. They are trying to file an emergency psychiatric hold on you. Meet me at the diner on 4th Street in 20 minutes. Come alone." Macon. The quiet, subdued guy Corinne married 3 years ago. I had only met him once at a brief, tense family gathering before the explosion that ruined my life. He always seemed like a ghost, a shadow just nodding along to whatever Corinne demanded. Why was he contacting me now? Why was he warning me? I showed the terrifying text message to Hollis. She looked at me, her jaw set tight, her maternal instincts fully activated. Go meet him. I will lock all the doors, draw all the blinds, and keep Veda away from the windows. Keep your GPS location sharing on your phone. If you do not text me every 10 minutes, I am calling the cops and reporting them. I grabbed my car keys and my heavy jacket. The game had just changed drastically. My family was not just trying to manipulate me emotionally anymore. They were actively trying to strip away my freedom and my sanity using the law. I needed to know exactly what they were planning, and Macon was apparently handing me the enemy's playbook. Part 4. Fanboy 2 Ben Trong Word Count Target. 1,400 words. I pulled into the cracked asphalt parking lot of the diner on 4th Street. The flickering neon sign buzzed loudly in the gray, damp afternoon air, casting a sickly red glow over my windshield. I sat inside my locked car for a full minute, scanning the surrounding area, checking every parked vehicle to make sure my parents' rented black SUV was nowhere in sight. When I was absolutely sure the coast was clear, I stepped out into the chill and walked inside the greasy diner. Macon was sitting alone in a dim back booth, nursing a chipped ceramic cup of black coffee. He looked terrible. He was only 32 years old, but in that harsh diner lighting, he looked 10 years older. He had deep, dark bags under his bloodshot eyes, his shoulders were slumped in defeat, and his hands were trembling slightly as he held the warm mug. I slid into the vinyl booth across from him. I did not say hello. I did not offer any pleasantries. I just stared at him, waiting for him to speak. Macon looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and profound exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice raspy and dry. "You have exactly 5 minutes, Macon. Tell me what the hell is going on before I walk out of here and call the police." He took a deep, shuddering breath, looking around the nearly empty diner nervously to ensure no one was listening. "I cannot do this anymore, Marin. I cannot pretend that what your family is doing is normal or legally okay. I love Corinne, I really do, but her sickness, it has turned your parents into literal monsters. And it has made Corinne cruel beyond belief." "She was always cruel," I corrected him flatly, refusing to let him rewrite history. "But what is this text message about a psychiatric hold? What are they planning?" Macon reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a small, silver digital voice recorder, and slid it across the sticky diner table toward me. "They had a secret family meeting last night at the cheap motel they rented," Macon explained, rubbing his tired eyes. I pretended I was asleep in the bed, but I recorded their conversation on my phone and transferred it to this device. "Your dad has been talking on the phone to a shady family lawyer back in Ohio. Because you rejected their demands this morning, they're abandoning the guilt trip and moving straight to Plan B." My stomach dropped into my shoes. "What exactly is Plan B, Macon?" "They are going to call the local police department and Child Protective Services," Macon said, swallowing hard, looking as if he were about to be sick. Your mother is going to file a false report claiming she visited you today and found you having a severe, violent postpartum psychotic break. She is going to lie and say you were screaming at the walls, throwing heavy objects, and explicitly threatening to harm Veda. Your dad is going to back up her fabricated story as a witness. They want the police to arrive and place you under a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold. I felt the blood rapidly drain from my face, leaving my skin cold and clammy. The sheer, calculated evil of their plan took my breath away. They were willing to falsely imprison me in a locked mental institution, strip away my civil rights, just to gain physical access to my daughter. Once you are locked away in a psych ward, Macon continued, looking down at his coffee ripples, your dad plans to file a motion for emergency temporary guardianship of Veda. He plans to tell the judge that your wife, Hollis, has no legal standing because he does not recognize your same-sex marriage as valid, and that the child is in immediate danger. I grabbed the silver recorder off the table and shoved it deep into my jacket pocket. This was not just toxic, dysfunctional family drama anymore. This was a highly organized criminal conspiracy to kidnap my child using the legal system as a weapon. Why are you telling me this, Macon? I asked, narrowing my eyes at him, searching for a trap. You are her husband. You want Corinne to live, don't you? Why betray them? Macon rubbed his face tiredly, letting out a hollow laugh. Of course I want my wife to live. But not like this. Not by destroying an innocent little girl and ruining your entire life. I have watched them manipulate everyone around them for months. The GoFundMe money? The $45,000 they raised from church folks? Corinne used $10,000 of it to buy a designer handbag online last week because she said she was feeling depressed about her hair falling out from chemo. They are not desperate, helpless victims, Marin. They are predators looking for a free ride. Macon stood up, throwing a crumpled $5 bill on the table to cover his coffee. They do not know I am here. Protect your kid, Marin. Because they will not stop until they take exactly what they want. I watched him walk out of the diner, his silhouette disappearing into the gray afternoon. I sat there for a moment, letting the horrific reality wash over me. My parents were monsters, and they were actively hunting my child. I pulled out my phone and quickly dialed Hollis's number. She answered on the very first ring, sounding breathless. Are you okay? We need a lawyer right now, I said, my voice trembling with contained rage. They are trying to swat us with a fake psychiatric emergency to steal Veda. Marin. Hollis's voice suddenly cracked. It was a sound I had never heard from her before in all our years together. Pure, unfiltered, terrifying panic. Hollis, what is wrong? Talk to me. The daycare just called. Hollis breathed heavily into the phone, her voice shaking violently. The principal. Your mother. Blythe is at Veda's daycare right now. She signed the visitor log as Veda's grandmother. She told the front desk she was there to drop off a forgotten lunchbox, and they let her walk right into the outdoor playground area. The entire world tilted violently on its axis. The greasy diner walls seemed to close in on me, suffocating me. Is Veda safe? I demanded, sprinting out of the booth and throwing the heavy glass diner door open, nearly shattering it. The teachers are out there supervising, but your mother is sitting on the bench talking to her, Hollis said. I am leaving the house right now. I am 5 minutes away. I am 3 minutes away, I yelled, throwing my car into reverse before my door was even fully closed. Call the police. Tell them an estranged relative is attempting a kidnapping at the school. Do it now. I drove like an absolute madwoman, weaving recklessly through afternoon traffic, my heart pounding so hard it physically hurt my ribs. My mother had gone to my daughter's school. She had bypassed me. She had bypassed Hollis. She went straight for the vulnerable prey. I gripped the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, praying to whatever was listening that I would get there before she did something unforgivable. I slammed my car into a parking spot outside the Sunflower Daycare Center, the tires screeching loudly against the pavement and leaving black marks. I did not bother turning the engine off or grabbing my keys. I sprinted toward the chain-link fence that surrounded the outdoor playground, my eyes frantically scanning the sea of running toddlers. Through the metal links, I saw her. My mother, Blythe, was sitting on a low, brightly colored wooden bench near the sandbox. She was wearing her expensive pearl necklace and a floral blouse, looking entirely out of place among the plastic toys. And sitting right next to her, looking confused and slightly scared, was my 5-year-old daughter, Veda. I did not scream. Screaming would alert her, give her time to hide what she was doing, or worse, cause a panic. I moved quickly and silently through the front gate, flashing my parent ID badge to the stunned receptionist who tried to stop me, and pushed my way forcefully through the heavy glass doors leading directly to the yard. I pulled out my phone, switched the camera to video mode, and hit record. If I was going to destroy these people and protect my family, I needed indisputable, visual proof of their madness. I crept up quietly behind a large plastic yellow slide, keeping the phone camera trained steadily on my mother's face. "You see, sweetie," my mother was saying in that sugary, fake voice that made my stomach churn. "Grandma just wants to play a fun little game with you. If you win the game, you get this huge, delicious lollipop." My mother held up a massive, rainbow-colored lollipop in her left hand. Veda's eyes went wide, tempted by the candy. But it was what my mother was holding in her right hand that made the blood in my veins run freezing cold. She had it half hidden behind her expensive leather purse. A long, sterile white cotton swab. The exact buckle swab kit from the pink gift bag she brought to my house. She was actively trying to trick a kindergartner into giving up a DNA sample on a public playground. "All you have to do," my mother cooed, leaning closer to Veda, invading her personal space, "is open your mouth really, really wide and let Grandma rub this little magic wand on the inside of your cheek. Just for 2 tiny seconds. Can you do that for Grandma?" Veda hesitated, leaning away from the swab, then looking at the lollipop. "Mama says I am not supposed to put things in my mouth from strangers." "Oh, I am not a stranger. I am your family, sweetheart," my mother insisted, pushing the sterile swab closer to my daughter's face, her patience clearly wearing thin. That was enough. I stepped out from behind the slide. "Get your filthy hands away from my daughter," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the chaotic playground noise like a surgical scalpel. My mother jumped, violently startled, and dropped the swab into the dirty wood chips. Veda instantly slid off the bench and ran toward me, wrapping her arms tightly around my legs and burying her face in my scrubs. I picked Veda up, resting her securely on my hip, still holding my phone steady with my other hand, recording every single second of the fallout. My mother stood up, nervously smoothing her floral skirt, looking around frantically to see if any teachers were watching. A few of them were starting to walk over, looking concerned by the sudden tension. "Marin," my mother said, dropping the sweet grandmother act entirely. Her eyes narrowed into cold, calculating slits. "You are overreacting as usual. I am just visiting my granddaughter. I have a right to see her." "You brought a medical DNA swab to a daycare facility to extract genetic material from a minor without parental consent," I stated loudly and clearly, ensuring the phone's microphone and the approaching teachers heard every word. "That is medical battery. That is criminal assault." My mother's face twisted with ugly, desperate rage. She stepped toward me, pointing a manicured finger aggressively at my chest. She forgot where she was. She forgot her sweet old lady act. "She is our property," my mother hissed, her voice dripping with venom and entitlement. "She has Oakley blood. You are nothing but an incubator who got lucky. You owe us that marrow. Karen is worth 10 of you, and I will not let my real daughter die just because you want to play victim." I stared at her, making sure the camera captured every single word of that horrific, insane statement. The principal of the daycare, Mrs. Higgins, rushed over, looking absolutely horrified by the screaming match. "Ma'am, you need to leave the premises immediately, or I am calling the police," Mrs. Higgins said firmly, stepping bravely between me and my mother. "I already called them," Hollis's voice rang out from the entrance. Hollis came running through the playground gate, flanked by 2 armed, uniformed police officers. My mother's confident, aggressive posture instantly collapsed. She looked at the police officers, then at me, realizing with dawning horror that she had walked right into a massive trap. "Officers, this woman is my mother. But she is legally estranged, I said calmly, handing a crying Veda to Hollis so I could deal with the situation. I pointed to the white swab lying in the dirt. She trespassed on school property under false pretenses and attempted to perform an unauthorized medical DNA collection on my 5-year-old child. I have the entire incident on video, including her explicit verbal threats against me. The officers moved in quickly, asking my mother to step away from the children. She started crying instantly, launching into a hysterical, theatrical performance about her dying daughter and how I was a cruel, abusive mother keeping a grandmother from her family. But the officers were not interested in her fake tears. They looked at the medical swab on the ground, looked at my video footage, and escorted her off the property, issuing a formal, written trespassing order right there in the parking lot. I hugged Hollis tightly, burying my face in her neck, breathing heavily. We had stopped them today, but I knew this was just the beginning of the war. That evening, the house was heavily locked. We ate pizza in the living room, trying desperately to make things feel normal for Veda. I had backed up the playground video to 3 different cloud drives and sent a copy of Macon's audio recording to a secure, hidden folder. At exactly 8 o'clock at night, a loud, authoritative knock echoed through our front hallway. Hollis and I looked at each other, panic flaring in our eyes. The police had already handled my mother. Who the hell was at the door now? I walked over and looked through the glass peephole. A tall man in a cheap brown suit was standing on my porch, holding a thick clipboard. He held up a state badge to the peephole. I opened the door, leaving the heavy security chain attached. "Can I help you? Are you Marin Oakley?" the man asked. His voice was professional, but his eyes were scanning the inside of my house critically, looking for flaws. "My name is Declan. I am an investigator with the Department of Child Protective Services. We received an emergency hotline report this afternoon alleging severe child endangerment, parental psychosis, and an unfit home environment at this address. I need to come inside and evaluate the child immediately." My dad had done it. Even after my mother got caught and humiliated at the daycare, Alden had executed his malicious Plan B. He had called CPS, trying to paint me as a crazy, abusive mother to take Veda away using the government. I felt a cold, sharp, terrifying smile form on my lips. They thought they had cornered a frightened, helpless victim. They did not know they had just handed me the exact legal weapon I needed to destroy them completely. "Of course, Declan," I said, unlatching the chain and opening the door wide. "Please come in. I have a lot of very interesting files I think you are going to want to see." Thank you so much for watching this far into the story. If you are enjoying this drama and want to see how I handle the CPS investigator, please leave a comment down below saying, "I'm Win." This is our secret code for the true fans who watch until the end, and I will personally heart and reply to every single comment with that keyword. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I led Declan, the Child Protective Services investigator, into my living room. He walked with the stiff, hyper-vigilant posture of a man who is used to walking into chaotic, dangerous situations. He held his thick clipboard tight to his chest, his eyes darting around, taking in the framed artwork Veda had painted, the neatly organized bookshelves, the spotless hardwood floors. He was looking for signs of the severe parental psychosis and child endangerment my father had so vividly described on the emergency hotline. Hollis came downstairs a moment later, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. She set them down on the coffee table with a steady hand. She introduced herself clearly and calmly as my wife and Veda's mother. Declan blinked. You could practically see the gears shifting in his head. My father had undoubtedly omitted the fact that I was married to a respectable elementary school teacher. He had painted a picture of a deranged, isolated woman holding a child hostage. Declan sat down on the sofa, pulling out a pen. "Miss Oakley, I am going to be very direct with you. We received a highly disturbing report. The caller, who identified himself as your father, Alden Oakley, stated that you are currently suffering from a violent psychological break. He claimed you were throwing objects, screaming incoherently, and posing an immediate physical threat to your 5-year-old daughter. He requested an emergency psychiatric hold and temporary emergency guardianship." I did not cry. I did not get defensive. I took a slow sip of my tea, feeling the warm liquid steady my nerves. Declan, I am the charge nurse at the intensive care unit of the local hospital, I said, keeping my voice level and professional. I have no history of mental illness. I have no criminal record. My daughter is asleep upstairs, healthy, safe, and deeply loved. The man who called you is my estranged father. He kicked me out of his house into a snowstorm when I was 24 and pregnant. I have not spoken to him in 6 years. He tracked me down yesterday for one very specific reason. Declan stopped writing. He looked up at me, his professional mask slipping just a fraction to reveal genuine curiosity. And what reason is that? My older sister, Corinne, has acute myeloid leukemia, I explained. They need a bone marrow donor. They drove 400 miles unannounced with a pre-filled surgical consent form, demanding that I hand over my 5-year-old daughter to be harvested for her marrow. Declan stared at me. They wanted to use a kindergartner as a donor for an estranged aunt? Yes, Hollis chimed in, sitting close to me. And when Marin refused, they threatened to use your agency to take our daughter away. He explicitly stated in our living room that he would report our household as unfit because we are a same-sex couple and that courts prefer traditional grandparents. Declan tightened his grip on his pen. As an investigator, he deals with terrible people all day, but people who weaponize the child welfare system to extort medical procedures are a rare, disgusting breed. However, he still needed proof. Those are extremely serious allegations, Declan said carefully. Do you have any evidence to support this? I felt a cold, triumphant smile touch my lips. I have a lot of evidence. I reached into my work bag and pulled out the thick, cream-colored surgical consent form my mother had left behind in her panic yesterday. I slid it across the coffee table. Declan picked it up, reading the donor line filled out with Veda's name, age, and relationship. His jaw tightened. Then, I pulled out the digital voice recorder Macon had given me at the diner. I pressed play and set it on the table. The tinny, recorded audio of my parents and Corinne plotting in their cheap motel room filled the quiet living room. We all sat in silence and listened to my father detail his malicious plan to file a false CPS report, lie about a psychotic break, get me locked in a psych ward, and steal temporary guardianship of Veda to force the surgery. Declan's face went from pale to a deep, furious shade of red. Listening to citizens casually plot to manipulate state resources for kidnapping tends to provoke a strong reaction from state employees. There is more, I said smoothly. I handed him my phone, pulling up the video I had recorded at the daycare just hours ago. Declan watched the footage of my mother sitting by the sandbox, holding a giant lollipop in one hand and a medical swab in the other, trying to coax my daughter into a DNA test behind my back. He heard my mother hiss that my child was their property. The daycare principal, Mrs. Higgins, can verify this, Hollis added. The police removed her from the premises and issued a trespassing order. I was not finished. I wanted to burn their entire empire to the ground. Since my father was so concerned about Veda's welfare, I continued, sliding a thick stack of printed papers toward Declan. I thought you should see his federal tax returns. For the past 5 years, my father has claimed Veda as a dependent living in his home in Ohio. He has collected thousands of dollars in tax credits for a child he threw away. And here, I slid the screenshots of the GoFundMe page over, is the charity fraud campaign they are currently running, using stolen photos of my child to raise $45,000 under the false pretense that I am extorting them. Declan looked at the mountain of undeniable, documented evidence sitting on my coffee table. He slowly put the cap back on his pen. The investigator who walked in here looking for a crazy, abusive mother was gone. In his place was a man who realized his agency had just been used as a loaded gun by a family of narcissistic criminals. Ms. Oakley, Declan said, his voice dangerously quiet. Filing a false report to Child Protective Services is a serious crime. Attempting to weaponize state resources to coerce a medical procedure on a minor is a nightmare for a prosecutor, but a dream for a defense attorney. I am closing this case against you immediately. It will be marked as maliciously unfounded. He gathered the copies of the tax returns, the GoFundMe screenshots, and the consent form. I am mandated to report the tax fraud to the IRS, and I will be forwarding the audio recording and the daycare incident to the local district attorney for potential charges of extortion and attempted kidnapping. Your family made a very grave mistake calling my office. Declan stood up, extending his hand. I shook it firmly. Keep your doors locked, he advised, walking toward the exit. Desperate people do stupid things when they realize they have lost. I closed the door behind him and locked the deadbolt. I leaned back against the wood, letting out a massive breath I did not realize I was holding. Hollis wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her head on my shoulder. We had survived the legal ambush. My father's master plan had just spectacularly backfired, trapping him in a web of federal and state investigations. But as I stood there in the quiet hallway, a lingering, nagging thought kept itching at the back of my brain. Something about the surgical consent form and the buccal swab did not make logical sense. As a nurse, I am trained to look for the missing piece of the clinical puzzle. Why were they so desperate to swab Veda today if they already had the surgical consent forms filled out yesterday? I needed to make a phone call to a specialist. I needed to talk to Tamsin. Tamsin is one of my oldest friends in the medical field. She works as a senior transplant coordinator at a major hospital network 3 towns over. She spends her entire life matching donors to patients, navigating the incredibly complex ethical and medical labyrinths of organ and marrow transplants. If anyone could help me make sense of my family's chaotic medical timeline, it was her. The next morning, after dropping Veda off at daycare with strict instructions to the staff that nobody except Hollis or myself was allowed within 50 feet of the building, I drove straight to Tamsin's office. I sat in her small, sterile office surrounded by towering stacks of medical files. I slid the thick cream-colored consent form and the plastic-wrapped buccal swab across her desk. My family drove from Ohio, I explained, pointing to the paperwork. They told me Veda was a match for my sister's AML. They brought this consent form already filled out with Veda's name. But the next day, my mother tried to secretly swab Veda's cheek at her school to get her DNA. Tamsin, it makes zero sense. If they already knew Veda was a match, why were they trying to forcefully collect her DNA a day later? Tamsin frowned, pushing her stylish glasses up her nose. She picked up the cream-colored consent form, studying the hospital letterhead, the formatting, and the tiny barcode printed at the bottom right corner. "Marin, this is a real form," Tamsin said slowly, running her finger over the thick paper. "It is a standard pediatric marrow donation consent form. But there is a huge problem." "What?" I asked, leaning forward, my heart beating a little faster. "You cannot generate this specific surgical consent form from a transplant center unless there is already a confirmed HLA tissue match in the Federal Registry," Tamsin explained, her professional tone kicking in. "The hospital's legal department would never issue a surgical consent document with a donor's name printed on it if they had not already run the blood or saliva and confirmed a positive match. The liability would be astronomical." I stared at her, the pieces slowly clicking together in my mind. But they never had Veda's DNA. I checked her mouth myself after my mother dropped the swab. Nothing touched her. They never had a single cell of her body. Tamsin leaned back in her chair, a look of profound disgust crossing her features. "Then this paperwork is fraudulent. They did not get this from the transplant center. They either stole blank forms, or they went to a shady private clinic, paid someone off, and printed this to look official." My blood ran freezing cold. "They faked it." "They faked the match," Tamsin confirmed, tapping the paper. "They never knew if Veda could actually help your sister. They had zero medical proof. They gambled their entire relationship with you. They risked going to jail for kidnapping, all on a massive bluff. They fabricated a matching granddaughter to close a sale. They thought if they shoved official-looking paperwork in your face and told you Veda was the only hope, you would cave under the moral pressure and sign away your child's bodily autonomy." The sheer, staggering manipulation of it left me momentarily speechless. They had weaponized my conscience against me. They had used my dying sister's face to try and trick me into handing over my healthy 5-year-old daughter for an invasive, painful surgical procedure that might not have even helped Corinne in the first place. It was sick. It was twisted beyond comprehension. But why? I whispered, staring at the fake form. Why go through this insane, criminal charade? Why not just call me on the phone, apologize for kicking me out, and ask me nicely to get Veda tested like normal human beings? Tamsin sighed heavily. Because asking you nicely means giving you power. It means admitting they need the daughter they threw away. Narcissists cannot handle that. They would rather steal from a child than beg from an estranged daughter. Plus, there's something else. Tamsin turned to her computer monitors. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Let me look up your sister's case in the National Registry. It is confidential, but as a coordinator, I can see generalized match statuses. Give me her full legal name and date of birth. I gave her Corinne's information. Tamsin typed it in and stared at the screen for a long, quiet minute. The blue light from the monitor reflected in her glasses. Marin, Tamsin said, her voice dropping to a low, serious register. Your family is lying about something else. Something much worse. I felt my stomach plummet. What is it? They told you Veda was their only hope, right? Tamsin asked, pointing at the screen. They said they were running out of time and options? Yes. My mother said they tried everything and the treatments were failing. That is a lie, Tamsin said flatly. Your sister is currently listed in the National Bone Marrow Registry. And according to this file, she has a match. A confirmed, adult, unrelated donor in the system. It is a 9 out of 10 HLA match. That is an incredibly strong match for an unrelated donor. It is more than enough to proceed with a successful transplant. I stood up from my chair, my mind reeling. She has a match? A real adult match? Then why are they hunting my 5-year-old daughter? Tamsin clicked on another tab, reading the notes attached to the file. Her expression darkened with every word she read. Because of the money, Marin, Tamsin said, looking up at me with sad, tired eyes. The confirmed donor is located in Germany. To harvest the marrow there and transport it securely to Ohio via specialized medical courier costs a premium. Your sister's specific health insurance policy has a cap on out-of-network international donor procurement. The out-of-pocket cost to your family would be roughly $30,000. The room spun. I braced my hands on the edge of Tamsin's desk to steady myself. $30,000, I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Your parents refused to pay it, Tamsin said softly. The notes here say the family declined the international donor due to financial constraints. They opted to search for a domestic pediatric relative instead. I closed my eyes, a wave of pure, blinding rage washing over me. They had raised $45,000 on GoFundMe. Corinne had just spent $10,000 of that charity money on a designer handbag because she was feeling sad. My father had hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in retirement accounts and stolen tax credits. They had the money. They easily had $30,000 to save Corinne's life. But they did not want to spend their own money. They looked at the $30,000 price tag to save their golden child, and they decided it was too expensive. They decided it would be much cheaper, much more cost-effective, to drive 400 miles and terrorize my innocent 5-year-old daughter into giving up her marrow for free. They viewed my child as a discount medical coupon. I am going to destroy them, I whispered, opening my eyes. I am going to take everything they have. Marin, what do you want to do? Tamsin asked, looking genuinely worried for me. I need a favor, I said, looking at her dead in the eye. I need you to draw my blood right now. I want to be tested. I want to know my exact HLA tissue match for Corinne. Tamsin looked surprised. You want to donate? I want the test results, I corrected her. I want to know exactly what kind of cards I am holding before I burn their house down. Tamsin drew my blood right there in her office. She put a rush order on the HLA tissue typing, bypassing the standard waiting protocols because of her position in the transplant network. She promised me she would have the results within 48 hours. I drove home in a state of hyper-focused clarity. I was no longer reacting to my family's chaos. I was orchestrating their downfall. I walked into my house and found Hollis sitting on the living room floor, building a massive Lego castle with Veda. The sight of my daughter, safe and smiling, solidified the cold, hard knot of determination in my chest. I sat down with Hollis after Veda went to sleep and told her everything Tamsin had uncovered. The fake consent form, the 9 out of 10 donor in Germany, the $30,000 price tag they refused to pay while blowing GoFundMe charity money on luxury handbags. Hollis listened in stunned silence. When I finished, she just shook her head, tears of pure anger shining in her eyes. They are not humans, Marin. They are empty shells. How can parents do that to their own children? They only love what is useful to them, I replied softly, staring into the dark fireplace. I stopped being useful when I got pregnant and ruined their perfect church image. Corinne is their prize, but even her life has a strict budget. Veda was just free inventory. For the next 2 days, I went to work, I kissed my wife, I played with my daughter, and I waited. I did not respond to the endless stream of toxic text messages my father sent me. I ignored the voicemails from my mother, oscillating wildly between vicious threats and weeping apologies. I let them sweat in their cheap rented motel room, wondering what the CPS investigator was going to do. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Tamsin. I have the results, she said. Her voice sounded strange. Shaky. Tell me, I demanded, sitting down at my kitchen table. Marin, the genetic markers. Tamsin took a deep breath. You are a perfect match. A 10 out of 10 HLA match. It is exceedingly rare to get a full 10 out of 10 match even among siblings, but your markers aligned flawlessly. You are the absolute best clinical option to save her life. Better than the German donor. Better than anyone. I stared at the wood grain of my kitchen table. A perfect match. A 10 out of 10. The irony of the universe is a cruel, hilarious thing. The daughter they threw into the freezing snow, the daughter they erased from their family tree, the daughter they deemed too sinful to sleep under their roof, was the only person on the planet carrying the exact biological key to save their precious golden child. Can you email me the official lab report? I asked, my voice steady. I need the document with the hospital seal on it. Sending it right now, Tamsin said. Marin, what are you going to do? I am going to cure my sister, I said coldly. But the medication is going to taste very bitter. I hung up the phone. I opened my laptop, printed the official 10 out of 10 match report, and placed it inside a manila folder alongside the printed GoFundMe screenshots, the tax returns, the CPS investigator's card, and the fake Veda consent form. I was assembling the ultimate legal and moral guillotine. I picked up my phone and dialed my mother's number. She answered on the very first ring, gasping for breath as if she had been staring at the screen for 2 days straight. Marin, she whispered, her voice trembling with manufactured hope. Oh, Marin, please tell me you have softened your heart. Please tell me you talked to the CPS worker and realized we only called because we were so desperate to save our family. Stop, I commanded, cutting through her theatrical nonsense. I am done playing games, Blythe. I want this over. Bring Dad and Corinne to my house tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock sharp. We are going to sit down, and we are going to finalize exactly what is going to happen regarding a marrow donation for Corinne. Do not be late. Oh, thank God, my mother wept loudly into the receiver. I knew you would see the light. I knew you would not let your sister die. We will be there, sweetheart. Thank you, thank you. I hung up before she could say another word. She thought she had won. She thought the threat of CPS had broken me, that I was finally submitting to their authority and handing over Veda. Let them sleep peacefully tonight, dreaming of their victory. It would be the last peaceful sleep they had for a very long time. Friday morning arrived crisp and clear. I sent Veda to spend the entire day at Hollis's sister's house, far away from the impending blast zone. I did not want my daughter breathing the same air as those people, let alone being in the house when the truth came out. Hollis stood by my side in the kitchen, a silent, immovable pillar of strength. I did not wear my casual clothes. I put on my dark blue hospital scrubs and clipped my charge nurse badge to my collar. I wanted them to remember exactly who they were dealing with. I was not the terrified 24-year-old runaway. I was a medical professional holding all the cards. At exactly 10 o'clock, the black SUV pulled into my driveway. I watched through the blinds as my father stepped out, adjusting his suit jacket, wearing a look of profound, sickening triumph. My mother followed, holding a new, pristine folder, probably containing a fresh copy of the fake consent form. Corinne stepped out last, leaning on my father's arm, looking weak but wearing a tiny, arrogant smirk. They thought they had broken me. I unlocked the front door and let them in. I did not offer them coffee. I did not offer them water. I pointed to the sofa. "Sit," I instructed. My father bristled at my commanding tone but sat down anyway. My mother took the armchair and Corinne sank into the plush cushions next to my dad. I remained standing, leaning against the edge of the coffee table, looking down at them. Hollis stood near the doorway, arms crossed, watching them like a hawk watching mice. "We are so glad you finally came to your senses, Marin," my father began, using his deep, pastoral voice. He opened his folder and pulled out a pen. "I know words were said in anger, but family must always forgive. If you just sign this consent form for Veda, I promise to call the state investigator and tell him it was all a misunderstanding. We can make that ugly CPS problem disappear today." I looked at the pen in his hand. Then I reached behind me, picked up my thick manila folder, and dropped it onto the glass coffee table with a heavy, satisfying thud. "Put your pen away, Alden," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "You are not getting a signature today. You are getting an education." My mother's fake smile faltered. "Marin, what is this? You said we were finalizing the donation." "We are," I replied smoothly. "But first, we need to clear up some accounting errors." I opened my folder and pulled out the first document. I slid it across the glass toward my father. It was the federal tax transcript. "For 5 years, you have claimed Veda as a dependent to the IRS, stealing thousands of dollars in tax credits for a child you abandoned," I stated clearly. My father's face instantly drained of all color. He stared at the tax document as if it were a venomous snake. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He was an accountant. He knew exactly what the penalty for federal tax fraud looked like. Before he could recover, I pulled out the next document and slid it toward my mother. It was the printed screenshots of the GoFundMe page. $45,000, I said, locking eyes with my mother as she visibly shrank into the armchair. "Raised by using stolen pictures of my child and lying to your entire church community, claiming I was extorting you. A beautiful charity fraud campaign. Tell me, Corinne, did you enjoy the $10,000 designer handbag you bought with the cancer money?" Corinne gasped, her hand flying to her chest. How do you know about that?" "Macon talks," I said simply. I watched the betrayal register on Corinne's face, her golden child armor cracking as she realized her own husband had turned against their toxic regime. "You hacked us," my father suddenly roared, trying to regain control by standing up. "This is illegal. I will have you arrested." "Sit down," Hollis commanded, taking a step forward. Her voice was surprisingly loud and terrifyingly stern, the voice of a teacher shutting down a classroom bully. My father, shocked by her authority, slowly sat back down. "You cannot arrest me for looking at public websites," I continued, unbothered. "And you certainly cannot use CPS to intimidate me anymore. I gave all of this evidence, plus the audio recording of your blackmail plot and the video of Blythe assaulting my daughter at the daycare, to investigator Declan yesterday." Panic, raw and unfiltered, finally descended upon the three of them. My mother started crying real tears this time. My father stared at the coffee table in utter defeat. They realized they had walked into a slaughterhouse. "The state is dropping the case against me and opening an extortion investigation into you," I informed them casually. "But that is not even the worst part. The worst part is this." I pulled out the thick, cream-colored consent form they had brought to my house 2 days ago. The fake one. "I took this to a senior transplant coordinator," I said, holding it up. "She confirmed it is a fraudulent document. You never had Veda's DNA. You faked this form to coerce me." We were desperate. Corinne cried out, her arrogance entirely gone, replaced by a whining, pathetic wail. "I am dying, Marin." We needed to know if she was a match. "But you did not need to know," I countered, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. I leaned in, placing both hands on the table, staring directly into Corinne's tear-filled eyes. Because you already have a match, don't you, Corinne? A 9 out of 10 unrelated adult donor in Germany. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My parents looked at each other in sheer terror. They thought that secret was buried deep in a hospital server. You have a match, I repeated, making sure they heard every word. But it costs $30,000 to transport the marrow. $30,000 that you refused to pay. You had $45,000 in stolen charity money, hundreds of thousands in the bank, and you still refused to pay it. You decided it was cheaper to drive here, terrorize my family, traumatize a 5-year-old child, and force her into surgery, just so you could get your medical treatment for free. I stood up straight, looking at the three of them. They were not powerful figures from my childhood anymore. They were small, greedy, pathetic criminals sitting on my sofa. You are monsters, I said quietly. All of you. My father buried his face in his large hands, rubbing his temples furiously as if trying to massage away the reality of the situation. My mother was weeping openly, her shoulders shaking, clutching her expensive purse like a life preserver. Corinne sat paralyzed, staring at the coffee table covered in the undeniable evidence of their collective crimes. The grand illusion of the perfect, righteous Oakley family had just shattered into a million jagged pieces on my living room floor. Marin, please, my mother choked out, her voice raw and pleading. She did not sound angry anymore. She sounded genuinely terrified. Please do not send those files to the police. Your father will lose his accounting license. We will be ruined in the church. Corinne will go to jail for fraud instead of getting treatment. You cannot do this to your own family. You did it to yourselves, Hollis said coldly from the doorway. You built the bomb. Marin just showed you the timer. What do you want? My father asked, his voice defeated, muffled behind his hands. He finally looked up at me, his eyes red and exhausted. He was speaking the only language he truly understood, transactions. How much money do you want to bury this? Name your price, Marin. I will write you a check right now. Just give me the hard drives and the paperwork. I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. It was a sound that scraped against the walls. You think I want your dirty money, Alden? You think I want a payout from a man who stole tax credits using his abandoned granddaughter's social security number? Then what do you want? Corinne screamed, her voice cracking in desperation. She leaned forward, tears ruining her makeup. You want to watch me die? Is that it? You want to stand over my grave and laugh because I was mean to you when we were kids? Fine. You win. I am dying. I do not have $30,000 left. The GoFundMe money was frozen by the website yesterday because someone flagged it for fraud. I paused. So that was why they were so panicked today. The charity money was gone, frozen by the platform's security team. Their free ride was over and their German donor was slipping out of reach. They were truly, completely backed into a corner. I do not want to watch you die, Corinne, I said, my voice eerily calm amidst her hysterics. I save lives for a living. I do not take them. I reached into the back of my manila folder and pulled out one final piece of paper. It was the official laboratory report from Tamsin's hospital, stamped with the blue medical seal. When I found out about your fake consent form and your German donor, I realized something, I said, walking slowly around the coffee table. You drove right past the most logical, biological solution to your problem. Siblings are the best genetic match. But you never even asked to test me. You went straight for my child because you thought she was an easier target. You thought asking me would mean giving me power. I dropped the lab report onto my father's lap. He looked down at it, his eyes scanning the medical jargon, searching for the conclusion. I got tested 3 days ago, I announced to the silent room. I am a perfect 10 out of 10 HLA tissue match for Corinne. My mother gasped loudly, clapping both hands over her mouth. My father's eyes widened in sheer disbelief, his hands trembling as he held the paper. Corinne stared at me as if I had just grown wings and descended from the ceiling. A perfect match. The holy grail of transplant medicine. Sitting right in front of them, wrapped in blue scrubs. You are a perfect match, Corinne whispered, her voice barely audible. A frantic, desperate light ignited in her sunken eyes. Marin, you can save me. You can actually cure me. I can, I agreed, nodding slowly. I have the marrow you need. I have the power to stop your cancer. And Veda is completely, permanently off the table. Her name is never to be spoken by any of you ever again. Thank God, my father breathed out, closing his eyes in profound relief. He actually smiled. A sick, arrogant smile returned to his face, believing that the crisis was averted, that the bloodline had saved them once again. Thank the Lord for his mysterious ways. Marin, we will schedule the procedure immediately. I will pay for your travel expenses to the clinic in Ohio. Shut up, I snapped, cutting him off so sharply he flinched. I leaned over the table, bringing my face inches from his. Do not ever mistake my medical ethics for forgiveness, Alden. I am not doing this because you are my family. I am doing this because I refuse to let your toxic rot turn me into a murderer. I will donate my marrow to Corinne. I will save her life. But it is not going to be free. The relief vanished from the room, instantly replaced by a thick, suffocating dread. You said you didn't want money, my mother stammered, looking confused and terrified. I do not want your money, I confirmed, standing up straight and crossing my arms. I want your total, unconditional surrender. I have drafted a legal contract with a lawyer. If you want my marrow, you are going to pay my price. I walked over to the entryway table, picked up a thick legal document bound in a blue folder, and tossed it onto the coffee table next to the evidence of their crimes. This is the deal, I said, my voice ringing with absolute, uncompromising authority. There is no negotiation. There is no bargaining. You will sign these papers today, in front of a notary I have waiting in a car down the street, or I will walk over to that fireplace, burn my match results, and you can go back to Ohio to plan a funeral. Corinne stared at the blue folder like it was a ticking time bomb. What is in it? Item 1, I began, ticking it off on my fingers. Alden and Blythe, you will both sign a legally binding affidavit permanently relinquishing any and all grandparent rights to Veda. You will sign a restraining order stating you will never contact me, my wife, or my daughter again. If you come within 500 feet of my family, you will be arrested. My father's jaw tightened, but he looked at the tax fraud documents sitting next to the contract and swallowed his pride. He nodded once, a stiff, jerky motion. Item 2, I continued, staring directly at my father. You will immediately file an amended tax return with the IRS for the past 5 years, removing Veda as a dependent. You will pay back every single cent you stole from the government, plus the penalties. I want the confirmation receipts sent to my lawyer by Friday. That will cost me over $20,000 in fines, my father protested, his face flushing red. It is either that or I send this file to the federal prosecutor and you go to federal prison for tax evasion, I replied coldly. Your choice, Alden. Pay the fines or wear an orange jumpsuit. He closed his eyes and slumped back against the sofa, utterly defeated. And finally, I said, turning my gaze to Corinne. She shrank back into the cushions, terrified of what I was going to demand from her. Item 3 is for you, sister. What? Corinne whispered, tears streaming down her face. You are going to pull out your smartphone right now, I instructed. You are going to log into your public Facebook account, and you are going to record a live video. In that video, you are going to confess to your entire church, your friends, and your community that the GoFundMe campaign was a massive fraud. You will admit that you lied about me extorting you for money. You will admit that you tried to force a 5-year-old child into an unnecessary surgery because you were too cheap to pay for an international donor. And you will publicly apologize to me and Hollis for weaponizing our marriage. Corinne's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror. No, Marin, please. I cannot do that. The church will shun us. My friends will abandon me. I will be a total pariah. Macon already left me yesterday. I will have nothing. You will have your life, I said, entirely unmoved by her tears. Your reputation is the price for my marrow. You wanted to use the internet to shame me and paint me as a monster? Fine. Now you are going to use the internet to tell the truth. You will post the video, and you will leave it pinned to the top of your page permanently. I will not do it, Corinne sobbed, burying her face in her hands. It is humiliating. Okay, I said simply. I reached down and picked up the blue legal folder. I turned to Hollis. Call the notary and tell him we will not be needing his services today. And please bring me the trash can so I can throw these medical results away. Wait, my mother screamed, lunging forward and grabbing my arm. Her fingers dug into my scrubs. Wait, Marin, please. She will do it. Corinne, you have to do it. Mom, I cannot. Corinne wailed. You are going to die if you don't, my dad suddenly roared, snapping out of his defeat. He glared at his golden child, the illusion of her perfection finally shattered by the stark reality of survival. Make the damn video, Corinne. Do you want to die over pride? Pick up your phone. Watching them turn on each other was the most validating moment of my entire life. The toxic machinery of the Oakley family, which had run on manipulation and unified hatred for decades, was finally eating itself alive in my living room. Trembling, sobbing, and completely broken, Corinne reached into her purse and pulled out her smartphone. She opened the Facebook app. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a toxic mixture of hatred, humiliation, and desperate gratitude. Press record, I commanded. I stood there and watched as my golden sister, the girl who had sneered at me from the staircase as I was thrown out into the snow, hit the live button. Through ugly, heaving sobs, she confessed to everything. She admitted the charity fraud. She admitted the lies. She publicly dismantled her own pedestal, brick by painful brick. It was excruciating to watch, and it was absolutely magnificent. When she finally hit end broadcast, she dropped the phone onto the floor and curled into a tight ball on the sofa, weeping uncontrollably. I walked to the front window and waved my hand. A moment later, my lawyer's notary walked up the driveway and entered the house. Over the next 20 minutes, in total, suffocating silence broken only by Corinne's quiet sobbing, my parents and my sister signed every single page of the binding legal contract. They signed away their rights. They signed their confessions. They signed away their power over my life forever. When the notary stamped the final page and left, I gathered the files into my arms. I will contact the transplant coordinator in Ohio tomorrow to schedule the extraction, I said to the 3 broken people sitting on my furniture. I will fly out, do the procedure, and fly home. I will not visit your hospital room. You will not contact me before or after the surgery. If you violate this agreement, the CPS files and the tax files go straight to the police. Now get out of my house. My parents and Corinne walked out of my house that Friday morning completely silent. There were no parting shots, no biblical quotes, no lingering threats. They looked exactly like what they were, prisoners who had just barely escaped the executioner, forced to leave their pride on the chopping block. I watched their rented black SUV pull out of my driveway and disappear down the street. I locked the deadbolt. Then I slid down the front door, sat on the hardwood floor, and finally let myself cry. I did not cry out of sadness. I cried because the massive, suffocating weight I had been carrying in my chest for 6 years was finally, permanently gone. Hollis sat on the floor next to me, wrapping her arms around me, and we just held each other in the quiet safety of our home. Everything unfolded exactly according to the brutal contract I had enforced. Corinne's confession video went viral within her community in Ohio. The fallout was apocalyptic for their social standing. The church elders, embarrassed by the massive public charity fraud, asked my father to step down from his leadership position. Members of the congregation who had donated to the GoFundMe demanded their money back, forcing my parents to drain their savings accounts to avoid wire fraud charges. Macon, disgusted by the depths of their depravity and armed with his own audio recordings, filed for divorce the very next week. Corinne was left entirely isolated, stripped of her golden child status, facing her illness with nothing but the reality of who she truly was. My father filed the amended tax returns. My lawyer sent me the confirmation receipts showing that Alden had paid nearly $25,000 in back taxes and severe federal penalties to the IRS. He had tried to steal from the government using my child, and the government had made him bleed for it. 2 weeks later, I flew to Columbus, Ohio. I checked into a hospital on the other side of the city from where my parents lived. I underwent the bone marrow extraction procedure. It was painful. It was exhausting. My hips ached for days, a deep, throbbing reminder of the physical sacrifice I was making. but I did it with a clear, uncompromising conscience. I donated my marrow. It was securely transported to Corinne's oncology team. The transplant was successful. My biological material grafted perfectly into her system, effectively curing the leukemia that was rapidly killing her. I saved her life. And I never saw her face. I did not allow any visitors in my recovery room. I did not accept the pathetic bouquet of flowers my mother tried to send to the nurse's station. As soon as I was medically cleared to travel, I boarded a plane and flew back to North Carolina, back to my wife, back to my daughter, back to the beautiful, hard-won life I had built from the ashes of their rejection. It has been a year since that nightmare week. Corinne is in full remission. She is alive, living in a small apartment alone, dealing with the social ruins of her own making. My parents are still together, living in their big, quiet house, ostracized by the community they once ruled. They have honored the legal restraining order. They have not called, written, or attempted to contact me or Veda. They know the loaded gun of evidence I hold is still aimed directly at their heads. Veda is 6 now. She started first grade this week. She lost her first tooth, and she still loves dinosaurs more than anything in the world. She does not remember the terrifying woman with the lollipop by the sandbox. She only knows a world where she is fiercely protected, deeply valued, and unconditionally loved by her 2 mothers. People ask me sometimes how I could be so cold. How I could force my dying sister to humiliate herself on the internet. How I could extort my parents and walk away without ever offering genuine forgiveness. They tell me that family is family and that grace is a virtue. Here is what I tell them, and this is why I am sharing this story with all of you today. Being genetically related to someone does not give them an all-access pass to abuse you. Being useful to someone in a medical crisis does not mean they actually love you. My family needed my blood, my daughter's DNA, and my usefulness the exact moment it could save the only child they actually cared about. They never loved me. They loved what they could extract from me. There is a whole generation of us out there who were raised as the scapegoats, the black sheep, the invisible children. We grew up believing that if we were just useful enough, quiet enough, accommodating enough, we might finally earn a seat at the table. We answer every frantic summons. We empty our bank accounts. We sacrifice our mental health, hoping that this time they will finally see our worth. They will not. A gift is something you freely choose to give. Love is not an invoice that comes due when a toxic relative gets sick. If you are listening to this right now and there is someone in your life who only reaches for you when they need to drain your money, your labor, your body, or your peace of mind, I want you to hear the lesson it took me 30 years and a mountain of legal paperwork to learn. You are allowed to say no. You do not owe anyone access to the beautiful life you built without them. Boundaries are not the opposite of love. Boundaries are how you survive contact with people who view you as a resource instead of a human being. That is my story. The story of a daughter thrown away for being a sin, who returned as a 10 out of 10 match and forced the monsters in her closet to pay the ultimate price for survival. I closed the door on them, gently, firmly, with both hands. And I have never once looked back. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of your own closed door, or the door you are currently finding the profound courage to finally lock, do me a kindness. Leave a comment below sharing your own experience. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to protect your own peace? How did you find the strength to do it? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if you haven't already, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so I can keep bringing you stories of justice, survival, and ultimate revenge. Thank you for listening.